So now, obviously, everybody is connected. Many in the audience online, some in the audience here in the European Parliament's premises. We do not have all technical issues solved yet, but I anyway start because everybody is waiting to start. And we have the interpreters, to whom I'm very grateful for interpretation again in German, English, and French. And we only have 1 hour of time in total, meaning until 7 p.m. in European time. This is why I will start now. I just received a text from New York City that Thomas Tödtling, heading the office of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Konrad Adenauer Foundation in New York City, would already be connected online. As usual in this parliament, parliamentarians are very busy. This is also true for Zeljana Zovko, member of European Parliament from Croatia and member of the US-Delegation of this very parliament, will arrive a bit later since she will have speaking time in the parliament. She will hold a speech in the European Parliament's plenary. That's why I will, in a few moments, quickly hand over the floor to Monika Rosen, who will moderate this discussion. Thomas Tödtling will be connected online. Martin Amanshauser will probably in the beginning be connected online and then join us due to traffic and other structural issues here in the European Parliament. I'm also happy that my newly elected Slovenian colleague is just joining us here in the room physically in the European Parliament. Monika Rosen serves as a Vice President of the Austro-American Association, ÖAG, as we call it in Vienna. She holds 30 years, you couldn't even imagine, 30 years, 3 decades of experience in the finance markets, in finance. And she holds degrees of universities in Vienna and the United States, among them the Georgia State University. But it's not the European Georgia, it's the American Georgia. With the European Georgia at the moment, we have some struggle with the government at the moment. So thanks for joining. Thanks to the colleagues also for joining here. And I'm confident that the technical issues will be solved soon. This is a very special day. It's Inauguration Day. This very day is Inauguration Day on Capitol Hill, rather inside than outside this time in the United States. And our issue we discuss about today would be America first, Europe fast, because this is what we want to be, fast in our decisions, fast in our action in order to deal with the 4 years of Trump administration ahead. Monika Rosen, thanks for moderating this. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this discussion on US-EU relations. As Lukas has rightly pointed out, my name is Monika Rosen. I'm Vice President of the Austro-American Society. Now, we have a lot of wood to chop, no doubt, so I will keep my introductory remarks appropriately short. As a matter of fact, I will confine myself to a couple of sentences, if I may, and I will read them to you. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. It is an illusion which experience must cure, which a just pride ought to discard. So wrote George Washington. He wrote it, he didn't say it, in his farewell address, which appeared in print in September 1796 in the Philadelphia Daily American Advertiser. And I'm going to play devil's advocate before I open up the discussion, and I'm going to read you another sentence from the speech that Trump is probably giving at this moment as we speak as the newly inaugurated US president. In his remarks, he's going to say, My message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. With that, I welcome to my immediate left Christiaan Alting von Geusau of the, Christian Democratic Institute. He is an experienced connoisseur of the United States. Not only that, he holds an American citizenship. So you tell me, and I'm playing devil's advocate, what's wrong with saying that it is time once again for courage, vigor, and vitality? I wholeheartedly agree.
Thank you, Monika. And let me first, for the record, correct something. You introduced me as coming from the Christian Democratic Institute. That's just a mere minor activity of mine that I enjoy very much doing. I'm just a member of the advisory board. I'm actually full-time engaged as a political advisor, also leading an international organization of parliamentarians, and I also am a professor of law. But most of all tonight, I am sitting here as a US citizen and as a EU citizen. In fact, I am Dutch, proudly Dutch, but I'm also proudly born in the United States of America and have spent a considerable amount of my life on both sides of the ocean. And I wanted to start my comments today with trying to put into perspective what we have witnessed happening in the United States during this past election season. Because it seems often that we in Europe don't really understand what is going on in the United States. And we have seen this heated campaign going on, where names are being called and mud is being thrown at each other. But I want to place this in perspective. Exactly 200 years ago, in 1826, so that's 200 years ago today, on the 4th of July, so Independence Day, 2026, so 200 years ago, on the same day, two of the most important founding fathers of the United States died. John Adams, who was the first vice president and the second president of the United States after George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, who was the third president of the United States and Secretary of State under John Adams. And it's interesting to understand because, you know, many people were saying the divisions in the United States, etc. And yes, they're there, and yes, they're visible. But I would just like to start with putting this in perspective by telling you that John Adams, who was succeeded as president after a very bitter, very nasty campaign between himself and Jefferson, those two men for 12 years didn't speak to each other. But after that, they found each other again, and they became dear, dear friends. And we actually have all the correspondence between Jefferson and Adams in a book that I have at home. And I have for you the last letter that John Adams ever wrote to Thomas Jefferson, to Jefferson. And I'll just read you 2 lines out of it, because in this way we can put everything that has happened in perspective, and then I go to what is currently happening in the Capitol. In this letter, the last letter is written on the 17th of April, 1826, where Adams answers a letter that Jefferson had sent him. And he says, "My dear sir, your letter of March 25th has been a cordial to me, and the more consoling as it was brought by your grandson. Your letter is one of the most beautiful and delightful I have ever received." And then he goes on to describe US politics, and it is as if he is talking about today. Because, ladies and gentlemen, US politics has never been any different in this regard 200 years ago as it is now. John Adams says, public affairs go on pretty much as usual, perpetual chicanery, and rather more personal abuse than there used to be. Mrs. Randolph and Macduff, those were two members of Congress, have out-Heroded Herod. Mr. Macduff seems to be swallowed up in chivalry. Such institutions ought not to be suffered in a Republican government. Our American chivalry is the worst in the world. It has no laws, no bounds, no definitions. It seems to be all a caprice. My love to all your family and best wishes for your health, John Adams. I think it's important to realize that, because we seem to be often carried away by the news of the day. I was just, as I was walking into this building, watching live the inauguration that was unfolding in the Capitol. And if you look at the images, this is preceded, for example, by the Vice President-elect, now Vice President, being received by the outgoing Vice President, and the same with the President. What happens? It's all in that chivalry. It's all in that peaceful transfer of power. So I just wanted to put this in perspective, and I know, Monika...
well, I'm going to have to enforce time discipline just a little bit, so we will now jump into the present, yeah?
Yes, we'll jump into the present from here. But there has been a lot of talk about US democracy in danger, and that's the first comment I want to start with, underlined by this anecdote.
Yeah, but
just now, there has been a peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah, on the 6th of January, 4 years ago, there was not. So, I mean, that looked bad, granted.
But we're speaking about today.
Yes, so we are.
There's a peaceful transfer of power. So I think it's important to understand that, because that brings me to the one point I want to stress here. I believe in the strength of the US democratic institutions. US democratic institutions, also with January 6th, 4 years ago, have after all proven to be robust. And I think this is the first message important for us Europeans. US institutions are robust, and they will also be the next 4 years. So, let's move to Europe fast now that America is first with the new presidency. I asked some of my friends in Washington this morning to give me some comments. People who are either were in the first Trump administration or might be in the next one, in this current one that has just come in. This is what they said. Tell them to buckle up. This is one of the messages I got from Washington this morning. Tell them to buckle up. And in a later point, I will give back now to Monika. In a later intervention, I will then explain to you a little bit what I see as the 3 most important challenges for the EU as we go into this new presidency.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, Christiaan. I would like now to go to New York. Elena? And Julia, excuse me, I'm sorry I got the name wrong. New York is up next. All right, so Thomas Tödtling there of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. I hope you can see and hear us, and welcome. And you tell me, Ian Bremmer speaks of a G0 world. No one power really can dominate the agenda. What is your impression there on the ground? And talk to me about the issue of multilateralism now on the eve of Trump's second term.
Yes, hello from New York. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here on this panel with all of you. First of all, I think, and this is at the end, I think what Ian Bremmer was talking about, the coinciding transformation not only in the United States but also in the international system. And this transformation in the international system is not something that just came now with the inauguration of Donald Trump. However, the new administration will definitely contribute to this transformation. And here in New York, we are mostly dealing with multilateral and global issues. And We see here that, of course, this will have an effect, and this will have like immediate effects, but this will also have long-term effects. And in particular, Donald Trump and his administration, who are not really known as a big supporter of multilateralism and multilateral organizations. On the contrary, there's a strong mistrust or distrust towards these organizations, a much more transactional approach to international relations. So I think as a long-term result of this presidency, it's possible that we move more away from a rules-based multilateral order towards a more multipolar order, which means that we see a weakening of international law, that we potentially see a strengthening of the concept of spheres of influence. So I think this is some kind of a long-term consequence of or potential consequence of such an administration. But this trend is not only coming with Trump, this is something we can witness already or have witnessed already some time ago. I think this has several implications for Europe. It has several consequences how Europe deals with the United States, because multilateralism and the multilateral order is, in my point of view, in the core interest of the European Union, of Europe, and of other regions in the world, in particular medium and small-sized countries. But what this particularly means for Europe, from my perspective, maybe I can elaborate a bit later, and I will give back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to ask Lukas here on my right. So if we think that Trump doesn't really believe in international organizations, he doesn't like to deal with a whole bunch of small countries, he always thinks, and I think Merkel pointed this out quite interestingly, that in any negotiations there has to be one party that loses. How do you think we can convince him otherwise? How can we we were not going to get him to change his ways, I don't think. But perhaps we can make him see another perspective, shall we say?
Well, the whole point of negotiations would be to create a win-win scenario. That's what negotiations are for. That's what democracy is made for. And this is what the language of democracy, namely compromise, which is the language of democracy, the language of parliamentarism, the language of freedom and peace, human dignity and opportunities for next generations is about. And in the first place, I have to say, I mean, Donald Trump was elected a second time to be the leader of the free world. So in the first place, what he has to do is to lead the free world. And one could also emphasize the expression free. So this is his obligation. It would not be in the first place his obligation to support activities or attitudes which would be against freedom, against liberal democracy, against everything civilization is about and generations before us have built. To make it less philosophical and more practical, one of the first visitors to Mar-a-Lago, so the I don't know, the transition capital or whatever it was, one of the first visitors there was actually Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, because when it comes to us in Europe, and this is our concern, we are not US citizens, beside, of course, Christiaan Alting von Geusau, as he has just pointed out, but most of us are not. So we are not supposed to think from the inside, even if media suggests us always to put ourselves into the position of a US citizen here. We are Europeans, and we Europeans should be concerned about two things in the first place. One, security. Second, economy. So this is what it is about. When it comes to security, we need NATO as our security umbrella. US is the largest NATO member state and pretty influential there. So it was important that Mark Rutte visited Donald Trump as a president-elect. And obviously, or let's say as rumors claim, the talk was good. Good for what? For Europe's security, because that's our concern. Meaning that obviously, and this is not the first time that this could be seen, and maybe proved. Obviously, it's possible to make, as he probably would express it, a deal with Donald Trump. He sees himself as a deal maker. Also, a deal means to create win-win scenarios. So the same happened with Jean-Claude Juncker, the former European Commission's president, who managed to avoid a trade war against Europe from the US side, or a mutually trade war, with talk one-on-one in the Oval Office with the that time President Donald Trump. I would like to have been a fly on the wall during that talk, because I don't know how he did it, but Juncker did it. And I suppose also Rutte did something like that in order to keep the free world together. And to keep it together is best done if the leader of the free world knows that he would be exactly that, the leader of the free world. When it comes to economy, besides security, we also have to talk about to avoid a new trade war and to work together. But here, especially Europe has to strengthen itself. Also in the field of security, by the way, Europe has to do its homework. But in the field of economy, I mean, the last mandate of the European Commission was bad. The new mandate is supposed to be good. We have better majorities in the Parliament. We have a better program of the European Commission. We have better mission letters, better commissioners. So I'm pretty confident that Europe will be capable to strengthen itself economically and become a partner on a level playing field with the United States.
A tall order, I dare say, given that the United States, of course, is the strongest economy in the world, and in terms of financial markets, my field of expertise has more than 60% of world market capitalization. But of course, we are supposed to develop our self-confidence. Christiaan, now you tell me, what are your brief 3 main points that you were going to introduce?
Yes, I think Europe has some major challenges, and I want to continue on what Lukas said, because that's the point. Donald Trump is a deal maker, and if Europe wants to achieve anything, it has to start making deals with Trump, and it has to be proactive in that. And I think this is absolutely essential, negotiation. There are 3, and by the way, as we speak, after the inaugural address that is currently going on, Trump will sign 100 executive orders today. So a lot is happening that we should be paying attention to. There are 3 main challenges where Europe should take the lead, where the EU should be proactive, and maybe also abandon the moral high ground that we have seen all too often in past years. First of all, negotiate, or where necessary, renegotiate energy deals. Europe is very dependent on the United States for LNG. Europe has to be sure that these deliveries continue under good conditions. The European Commission has already been dealing with that. That's the first challenge. We are not out of the conundrum yet with the very weak position of the EU on energy. Second, economically, as Monika just already mentioned, Europe is way behind the United States, and that's going to work in Europe's disadvantage if some things are not done. Economic output in the US is 40% higher than Western Europe. US growth is 10%, much higher than the miserable, what is it now, 1.5% or something? I don't think we have. Not even.
Excuse me, I don't think we have 1.5% in the
Not
Eurozone.
Even that.
Yeah, so it's below that.
It's even below that. The US has 45% higher productivity. It has a much higher GDP, 26% of the world GDP to Europe's 17%. And another final indicator, just to give you some ideas, Europe has about 18% home ownership against the US close to 70%. So just see those numbers. They're shattering those numbers, and Europe should really get into action. So that's the second challenge. And what does it have to do with that? The most important thing, and that really goes to the European Commission and the European Parliament: deregulate, 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 and innovate. And the third challenge is obviously militarily. Europe stands no chance without the United States. No chance. And I'm saying that here now for the moment with my European hat on. There's just no chance. So in those three areas, massive activity. And some is already happening, but it's still too little too late.
All right. We now welcome Zeljana Zovko, a member of the European Parliament and member of the Delegation for Relations with the United States. Thank you for joining us. Great to meet you. All right. So Christiaan has just pointed out that we don't stand a chance. Well, I think we do. We should not be too pessimistic about things. But yes, it is. We need to boost the economy. We need to provide for our own security. Where do you think Europe should I don't know, strengthen its defenses in every sense of the word, particularly in order to deal with this new administration that is about to come in?
Right, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I was late because I had to give my speech, but where do we have to start? It's with building the bridges and the contacts. We don't have no man is an island and no country is an island. I spent my Christmas holidays traveling around America, 7,000 kilometers, and America is a wasteland. It's a big country, so they don't need us as much, and they don't.
It is not a wasteland, but it's a big country. Okay.
It's a big country, but they don't really. I mean, if you see, there are no European tourists, there are Asian tourists. If you see wherever I've went through 13 countries, and before that. The fact is, we have a good relations. We have been working on building relations with Republican congressmen from all sides, and even those who are belonging to MAGA, to Trump's side. Long time before these results were known. The whole perception of those who knew America and who knew America for many years was that Washington is not America, and the Democrats have failed on the real issues that were concerned of many people in many citizens. But the fact is that even these Republicans who are now in majority in Senate and in Congress will not give their votes for granted they shouldn't be taken for granted by Trump. And their states, some of their states depend on the trade with Europe. We have good examples as well of states having good relations with industry in Germany, in Austria, in some other countries, and also personal relationship. In America, everything is personal. So I would not go into this terrible mood as we are having now. Of course, the radical far right is being invited because they were the only ones in this cacophony of support to Democrats that they were supporting Trump, and now they are invited for this, inauguration. But Trump is a businessman. And as everyone said, he will start making deals with the European Union, and very soon he will, or he already knows, that he has to talk to people who can deliver in European Union. And people who can deliver in European Union are the people who are in government, who are also in the power here, in a coalition. And the trade also is at European level in European Union. So these are the issues, and the Congress is being, we have checks and balances in America that are working. No one can change them. So we have elections every 2 years for Senate and the Congress. And these are some of the issues that we should take into consideration, and we should have a patience. And I don't like to fall into this pessimistic mode. I'm a much more optimist, and I'm doing these relations on behalf of EPP for a long time, as I used to work with Republican congressmen in the past. So I know how easily people get involved into this media spin that they might be enemies. They might be.
You mean that Europe and America are enemies? Is that what you're saying?
They are never enemies.
No, I agree with you.
Americans are made of European diaspora, so this is something that you should never forget. And,
no, I quite agree with you.
Yeah, it's like being an enemy with your heritage. It's being enemy with your roots. So, but we should come with respect as well when we are talking, not preach. This is something that some people are used to in European Union, especially in media bubble or in Brussels bubble. So come with respect, forget about preaching to someone, and first get to know America and the real issues that are concern of their citizens. I mean, if you see devastated city centers, Chicago, San Francisco, or New York, then you understand the people moved out. They don't want to live in these security-ridden areas where the problems have been for a long time not been addressed, and or if you see the amount of drugs that are being imported through the Mexico weak border or migration flows. I was chief election observer in Honduras. And the fall of all these states, the countries in Latin America who made their people leave and look for a safe haven in America. So these are some of the issues that Trump will address and Republican congressmen, but on the other issues, they will never make enemies with somebody that they made history with. That's European Union.
Very good. All right. We have just about 30 minutes under our belt here, so I would like to open it up to the audience here in the room. Unfortunately, who is following us, people following us online can't ask any questions. Are there any questions from the audience? Now, I need to ask how this works. I guess you raise your hand, and then you have a mic in front of you to talk. Yes, please. Yes, sir. There at the front.
Thank you. Richard Scholes, member of the European Parliament. I would rather reflect what you started with, quoting, leaders from the 17th, 18th century altogether. But I think this is something where we have to resonate, and sometimes Europeans are drawn into dwelling too much in the history. I don't think the Trump administration are really going to look what Jefferson said, what Adams did. The only thing that resonated in pre-election campaign was power through strength. That the only one I can attribute is Reagan. And the question is, will be that Reagan spirit type of power to peace through strength? And with this, that's what I use the word, the power to strength, strength that might. And I think that is the hybrid combustion that we might see with the Trump administration, be it European Union, individual member states. But with this, what I wanted to really ask is the composition of the Trump's administration. You talk that it's peaceful transition. Well, we see the outgoing President Biden just pardoned hundreds. Fauci was just pardoned. Is that peaceful? That is something, and we already know what Trump is saying, after whom he's going to go after. Is that peaceful transition? I don't think so. So this is a much broader internal divisions within U.S. still ongoing. And what I wanted to ask, if we look at the administration, so far, I don't think there's been a president of the United States that has gathered around him 13 billionaires serving in his administration. Will meritocracy will be something just a dream in U.S. politics? How do you see these effects where the politics will be very much intervened with the financial interests? And this is being labeled as some who are suggesting that oligarchic signs in U.S. politics. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this is something that the experts and scholars are saying from the rhetoric that is coming out, from the composition of the incoming administration as well. And this said, of course, for Europe, the number one thing, and I think the executive orders will follow, you mentioned 100, I heard 200, we'll see. In 24 hours, they will pile in. But this said, I think the biggest challenge will be for those EU member states that are not even close to 1% on defense expenditure. And I think security and defense right now is really paramount, and how you see those things.
I quite agree with you, sir. That you addressed a lot of issues, and I agree with you, of course, on the fact that all these billionaires are gathered around Trump at the inauguration. Of course, Musk being called a co-president, and big tech here being very much in focus. And I've heard that Europe needs to take a softer approach to big tech. I think when it comes, what it boils down to is confronting the economic realities. Who would like to talk about how we would best go about this, since we don't have as many billionaires as the United States, I don't think. I will in a moment. I will in a moment.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Yeah.
Just as a question of the billionaires, as opposed to European Union, every American congressman has to go. We do constituency work, but they do for the nation. They go for the nation. So they're always having these events for the nation. So it's totally a culture, different culture than we are having. So what Trump has said in his first term is that he will not be run by some lobbies or by some donator that will tell him what to do. He is now openly exposing those who are giving money. So, and it's completely in American culture to have this sort of governance. And I think this is something that we have to understand as Europeans as well, how American minds work. For them, if you don't have these donations, you cannot. But they are appointed. Yeah, but they are appointed. We are politicians appointed by the party. They can be. They can openly go and invest their money and be politicians. So that's the same thing.
Hold on just a second, Christiaan, briefly.
Yes, I just want to add something to those billionaires. I fully agree that it's a different culture than we know here in Europe. But there's another thing that has gotten a little bit lost in the media frenzy. Neither Elon Musk nor Vivek Ramaswamy have formal positions in the new cabinet. This is important to understand. The Department of Government Efficiency doesn't exist. It's something on paper. Yes, they got that little office in the White House, but they're just advisors who have to work with the Office of Management and Budget, who actually has to execute. So the Office of Management and Budget is like the budget ministry. They are the ones who have to execute this. So Vivek and Elon are just advisors, and they've been given until the 4th of July 2026. So I think we should also not overrate their importance.
No, I'm not quite sure I agree, but let's hand the floor to Martin Amanshauser, a writer and journalist. Thank you for joining us. And I understand you will be speaking in German. What can you say on the cultural differences, on the different views towards the world between Europe and the United States from your personal impression?
Von meiner persönlichen Sicht, okay, jetzt ist es da. Aus meiner persönlichen Sicht kann ich natürlich viel sagen, weil ich in Ohio in Bowling Green auf einer kleinen Universität unterrichtet habe und da eigentlich das erste Mal schon als später Erwachsener mit dieser Kultur in Berührung gekommen bin und am Anfang gedacht habe, aha, das ist ja gar nicht so, die sind ja gar nicht so oberflächlich. Die sind ja gar nicht so wie im Klischee. Es war für mich eigentlich ein Jahr, in dem ich mich die ganze Zeit gewundert habe. Und deswegen, ich will ja nicht sofort widersprechen, aber auch wenn jemand wie Musk keine offizielle Position hat, so hat sein Geld eine offizielle oder inoffizielle Auswirkung. Es fragt sich ja in diesem Trump-Kabinett, scheint mir, dass ein einziger Erwachsener sozusagen drinnen ist, der Außenminister. Und ich frage mich, wann wird das Ganze in die Luft gehen? Ich glaube nicht, dass es lang hält.
I'm going to disagree on that one. Scott Bessent, the finance minister, certainly is an adult in the room. I quite disagree. Okay. I have a lot of respect for him.
Ja, es ist nur die Frage, wie lange sich diese Leute halten werden und ob sich diese Leute halten werden oder ob sich die anderen Leute halten werden, die mehr in der Verschwörungssache sind. Und ich glaube, dass es nicht einen wahnsinnig großen Unterschied macht, ob sie jetzt offizielle Positionen haben oder nicht. Es ist so eine unberechenbare Welt, die mit dieser neuen Regierung kommt, dass wenn wir hier sprechen über Governance, wir wissen gar nicht, wie das dort funktioniert. Ich weiß nicht, ob es jemand von Ihnen weiß.
So I'm going to include Thomas, I'm going to go to New York again. We'll go to New York again. I'm going to include Thomas Tödtling there. So you think that governance and the way the new government is going to be a big problem? How do you view what you just heard from Martin's Amanshauser? Can you perhaps give us a little insight from the ground there?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be a different style of government. And I think on the one hand, it's true, of course, there's a completely different approach of politics towards business in the United States. But I think we can also not deny that a certain group of the economy, of the industry, of a certain sector has a quite huge influence now in the US administration, and this does not require any formal position. However, I think that we're talking about like what the US will do. I think we should ask ourselves in Europe, and we haven't done that, to be honest, in the last years, what are we going to do? And if we talk about deal making, deals are made from a position of strength and not in a position of weakness. So I think this is a learning for Europe. If we want to make deals, we have to make it from a position of strength, and this requires actions in the field of economy, but also in the field of foreign policy and foreign security. And I think we Europeans, and this could be an opportunity for us, are challenged by this administration in the sense of that we are self-reflecting what our interests and what are our limits, because I mean, of course we can make deals with the US administration, but I think maybe we come to a certain point where a deal is maybe too costly for us, whatever this then means. And this is important that I think we Europeans define our interests, we take our more responsibility. This is also something the Trump administration is expecting from us. And I think if we are taking over responsibility where it's necessary, then we have a good chance. But as our theme of this event says, we have to do it fast. We have to do it now. Coming back to the government question, I think we have to see how it plays out. There's a lot of media noise about it. There's a lot of guessing. I think we have to see what's going to happen. And we as Europeans, I think we have just to define what are our limits, what are our interests, and what we are willing to do for that.
All right, fair enough. Any more questions from the audience here in the room? Anybody else who would like to address my guests? Quiet bunch. All right, Christiaan, go ahead. Yes.
No, I just wanted to applaud what our last speaker said from New York, because I couldn't agree more. I think we have to be very careful in Europe not to continuously complain about everything that is so bad in the United States and this terrible new administration and this and that. Europe has to take responsibility. And this goes eastwards and it goes westwards. A weak Europe is not going to be able to withstand an aggressive Russia. But a weak Europe is also not going to be able to deal properly with the new US administration. So we have to get over it has already been mentioned a couple of times, we have to get over our preaching, as you say, and we have to get down to business. Start building relations with the new administration and stop complaining about this person or that person. To be quite honest, I've asked my friends in Washington, they couldn't care less what we in Europe think or what our judgment is on this new American administration. They literally couldn't care less. So whether we like that or not, that's just the reality. So let's just get down to business, start building bridges to also this US administration, and start doing what is necessary, because there is no alternative to the US European or the transatlantic alliance. There is no alternative. Do we want to go into the hands of China? Is that what we want? So we have to be realistic, and we have to stop complaining.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, and I was going to ask, how do we do that? What are the concrete steps to be taken? That's what I would like to know.
Yeah, but we have the means. First, the Council, European Commission President, and all the leaders have to have a common position and to go and to seek for the common ground. We are negotiating this trade agreement. We have to find as well win-win situation where they make some profit from us, as well as we are making this surplus from them. And we also have to stop bad-mouthing new American administration, and we are all ego-centric as politicians. I'm saying that as myself. I mean, if somebody says that I'm stupid or something, of course I will not talk to them. And it will take time to get to the right people. This is something that we are trying, and we have channels, and we are approaching, and I don't have any doubts that if we don't, and also we have to be humble. Without America, we cannot do anything in NATO. They are spending the most. We have to strengthen NATO pillar, but we have, as hopefully the future Chancellor Merz said, we have to spend it wisely. So we have to invest wisely into this money, and when we negotiate with Trump, we have to say how much money and in which defense production we are going to spend, and also to attract American investment into production of weapons here in Europe, and stop with this overburdening with regulations that we have had. We are coming with a position paper in order to cut much more bureaucracy, and I think meritocracy and the bureaucracy is really just brings a bell into American ear and into my ear, coming from Croatia, reminds me of communism, and that's for Americans, over-regulation is a communist principle, so they don't like to hear that. If we mean business, we have to learn not to talk bureaucratically, we have to be simple, and we have to find the same interests for both of them. And finally, I wouldn't say that these new politicians who are coming from the businessmen are bad ones. I mean, take, for example, this deal in Gaza. The guy who was negotiating on behalf of Trump, he's a estate owner. He's a guy who joined. He's a peace envoy. But in a business and in a management, if you can make a deal, you can with somebody who wants to cheat you in the money, you can make a deal in any other situation. But those who are risking their position in bureaucracy, they will never have a courage to do any sort of risk-taking in a business deal. So I rely much more on a businessman than on bureaucrats for making the deal and executing, in my experience that I had in my life.
All right, I find that very interesting, having worked in banking all my life. Lukas, what do you have to say on that note? Tell me. So the bureaucrats apparently are not the ones to deal with, yeah? So do you find that to be true?
Well, actually, I want to quote Montesquieu, maybe. Montesquieu said, if it's not necessary to make a law, what would be necessary then? Then it would be necessary not to make a law, to not make a law. And this also applies to bureaucracy. Of course, we need administration. We need proper administration. We need one-stop shops. We need rules. That's why we need a rules-based world order. We need regulation as long as it serves people in their peaceful dwelling, in their freely undertaken endeavors. We need that, but we don't need the kind of overregulation each and every political entity on each and every level, by the way, tends to create. And this is not only true for the EU when it comes to Europe, this is also true for other levels of politics and public service and civil service. And this also occurs, of course, in the home of the brave and the land of the free, as the United States described themselves in their anthem. So, of course, each and every politician would have the obligation to fight for freedom and to overcome the kind of administrative burden that reduces freedom. This should not be a question of ideology. This should be a question of, let's say, common sense when it comes to freedom and understanding. And so, again, to make it more practical, 4 years are not that long, even in the United States. I mean, in my home country, Austria, we talk about civil servants remaining in place for decades and politicians coming and going every year nearly. That might not be the case in the US. Civil servants come and go more often there, but 4 years are not that long. This is also part of democracy, as Sir Karl Popper said. Time is running out, but for the time being, of course, we will see decision-taking on a political level and hopefully also a good example for Europe when it comes to reducing bureaucratic burden.
All right, Martin, since you were late, I'm going to give the floor to you. I know that you are very skeptical of the United States, but please don't be too negative. I'm asking you here towards the end of the talk.
Ich gelte in meiner Welt überhaupt nicht als skeptical gegenüber den United States. Wir haben jetzt hier eigentlich was sehr Politisches gehört und ich kann nicht anders als Ihnen allen beipflichten, besonders das, was Christiaan gesagt hat. Das ist eben die Realpolitik. Ich glaube, Bismarck hat gesagt, Politik ist die Kunst des Möglichen. Und diese Kunst des Möglichen müssen Sie als Politiker eben ausloten. Und sie kommen dann natürlich auch zu Themen wie Business. Ich als Beobachter, als Journalist muss es natürlich von einer anderen Seite sehen. Ich muss sehen, was geschieht dort, welche Menschen kommen hin und wofür stehen diese Menschen. Und ich komme aus Österreich und Sie wissen, dass wir jetzt eine rechtsextreme Regierung bekommen werden und dass dieser rechtsextreme Bundeskanzler ganz offensichtlich sagt, er versteckt es überhaupt nicht, sondern er sagt, wir wollen ein Land wie Ungarn. Er ist ein Fanatiker für Viktor Orban. Ich bin oft in Ungarn, ich kenne mich dort aus und ich weiß, wie es den Leuten dort geht. Sie kommen nicht mehr raus aus dieser Sache. Und natürlich hat Österreich eine stärkere demokratische Vergangenheit, aber wir müssen aufpassen, dass diese Leute, die die Demokratie abschaffen wollen, die es zwar nicht mit diesen Worten, mit diesen starken Worten sagen, die ich jetzt sage, aber die es doch immer wieder zu verstehen geben, dass diese Leute nicht an die Regierung kommen. Ich glaube, wir müssen in Europa schauen. Und ich glaube, wir anderen, wir Vernünftigen, wir, die sagen können, die wir uns einigen können auf jemanden wie Angela Merkel, obwohl es jetzt schon einem vorkommt wie vor 10 oder 15 Jahren, es ist nur ganz kurz her, diese Leute müssen, ob sie sich jetzt als links, Mitte oder auch rechts selber sehen, sie müssen, glaube ich, unglaublich aufpassen, dass das Ganze nicht kippt. Es könnte in den USA kippen. Wir haben alle diese Befürchtungen. Es gibt weniger Politik jetzt. Wir haben jetzt sehr viel gesprochen über Dealmaking. Es gibt jetzt den Deal anstatt einer regelkonformen Politik. Es gibt die große Skepsis gegenüber internationalen Organisationen. Es kann sein, dass Trump das Land aus der NATO herausführt. Könnte sein, dass die UNO in einer anderen Position stehen wird nach diesen 4 Jahren. Es kann sehr viel sein und ich glaube, wir müssen dafür auch bereit sein.
All right, so we have to be ready. I think that is perhaps the most positive aspect that I can glean from these final remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been my pleasure, and I'm going to hand it back to Lukas. Perhaps my final thought, and I am a firm believer in the United States, Europe is basically is rooted in history, but the United States is an idea, and that should not be forgotten. And I've been very, very privileged to be here. Thank you very much. And with that, I hand it back to Lukas.
Thank you very much, Monika Rosen, for this excellent moderation under really difficult circumstances. I always call the European Parliament the most vibrant political arena on earth, and I remain with it. It was also proven today again. Zeljana Zovko was negotiating in the very plenary of this Parliament on the Middle East and came later, which is obvious. Martin Amanshauser was in the traffic. This is also part of a town like Strasbourg and came a bit later. We had technical issues in the beginning with the connection to New York City, to Thomas Tödtling from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, but we managed to do so thanks to Monika Rosen. Since Martin Amanshauser addressed also his home country, which also happens to be my home country, Austria, in the end, I want to raise a few thoughts. The one is democracy has always been fragile, always. That's part of it. It's a beautiful creation, democracy, and it's always sensitive, always fragile, and that means it always needs watchdogs of goodwill. Democracy has to be preserved in each and every, let's say, period of time and era. Secondly, the European Union, among many other things, has the advantage that, like in a family, if one family member is facing some struggle, we care for each other, we observe each other. We don't punish each other anymore, as it might have been a quarter of a century ago, but we help each other. We also empower each other and also strengthen the courage of one another. And this is true for a country which is negotiating on a new government of that kind, as my country is doing it, as I claim day by day. Federal President has given a clear mandate for this Freedom Party leader to do that, but it's not without alternative that he will really do it. So negotiations, again, as we talked about before, negotiations are made to find compromise, are made to make deals, and also are part of democracy. Negotiations can lead to the one or to the other direction, otherwise one wouldn't have to negotiate. And this is a state of play. At the moment, I think it's important to see this full picture, and maybe the cycle concludes here where I claimed in the beginning Trump has been elected to be the leader of the free world. So his first obligation would be to lead the free world. So leadership, in my view, means not, let's say, to reign over anything. It means to serve. It means to serve. And if we want to serve freedom as well, we would be part of the watchdogs for democracy, because it's not only lawmaking on a daily basis. It's not only about making decisions. It's by far not only addressing issues as populists, no matter of the left or the right, extremists, no matter of the left or right do it. We're not only addressing issues, and it's by far not separation and causing division. It's bridge building and solving issues, and being watchdogs overall of these values of human dignity, individual freedom, liberal democracy, rule of law, and what our civilization, the generations after a lot of struggle in the history, built for us. And this is true for all the free world. Very last point, this free world has been attacked from the outside. We must not forget that. We had two special committees here in the European Parliament dealing with foreign interference and disinformation. So if there is division within our societies, if there is separation within our societies, it's for a large part also caused from outside who try to cause this division, because weakening the free world, especially weakening Europe, means to divide Europe. That's why European unity is the first obligation if we want to defend our civilization's values. Thank you again. Thanks for the good talk. We will provide the link to this discussion in order to be watched afterwards for those who want after today's talk. I thank you again for joining. I thank those who were connected online. I send my regards to New York City, to Thomas Tödtling. Thanks also to you for joining, and thanks for the discussion, which was not with much conflict, but still very colorful, and that's what I like about it, and also informative. Thanks to Monika Rosen again, and thanks to all of you.